The shrill ring of the phone cut through the dim amber light of Victoria Reynolds' small Boston apartment, jolting her awake. The alarm clock read 11:47 p.m. Outside, snow fell silently over the old rooftops, the wind whispering through the cracks, like a reminder that the city was asleep except for her. Victoria reached for the phone, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Hello." On the other end came a trembling voice. She recognized a St. Luke's hospital nurse. "Victoria. I'm sorry to call this late. We have a special case. We need a speech disorder specialist." "It's urgent." She sighed softly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "I've been working 10 hours straight today, Natalie. You know that. I can't take another case. It's a 6-year-old boy. He hasn't spoken for 3 years. He just witnessed his mother." Natalie's voice faltered as though afraid of her own words, being shot dead right in front of him. The room fell utterly silent. Inside Victoria's chest, her heartbeat skipped. Shot dead. The words weren't just descriptive. They twisted like a knife in her memory. The psychologist had already tried no response. The father wants a speech therapist. And they're willing to pay any price. Victoria sat upright. Any price. Those words were usually reserved for the elite people who believed money could buy miracles. But miracles rarely came with a price tag. "What's the boy's name?" "Ethan Rhodes. His father's name is Dylan Rhodes." Victoria frowned slightly. The name sounded familiar. She'd read it in the papers a few years ago, linked to a car explosion in Chicago, a suspected internal power purge the police never proved. Rhodes. A name heavy as shadow. Yet she couldn't say no. Maybe because of the boy. Maybe because of something else she couldn't yet name. 30 minutes later, she was on her way to the hospital. Boston at night looked like a black mirror, reflecting 1,000 flickering lights. Snow streaked the taxi window in thin white ribbons. As the city blurred by, Victoria thought of the children she'd helped find their voices again. But she also knew sometimes silence came not from the mouth, but from the soul. When her parents died in a car crash when she was 8, her world collapsed into silence. Speech therapy saved her and taught her that silence isn't loss. It's a cry no one's heard yet. From then on, she devoted her life to helping others heal their voices. But tonight, she sensed this case would be different. Very different. St. Luke's Hospital glowed under fluorescent light. The 8th floor of the VIP wing was eerily quiet. 2 men in black suits were waiting when the elevator doors slid open. Not hospital security. Their posture, their eyes too sharp, too cold. "Miss Reynolds." "Yes, I'm here to see the patient, Ethan Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes is expecting you." Mr. Rhodes. The way they said it sent a chill down her spine. The father was waiting. The door opened to a cold white room. On the bed, a small boy sat curled up, his sky-blue eyes staring blankly into space. Scratches on his wrists, a broken crayon clutched in one hand. No sound. No reaction. Victoria lowered herself to the floor without a word. She quietly took out paper and a pencil. She began to draw circles, clouds and birds. Each stroke is an invitation. After a long moment, Ethan's gaze flickered, landing on her hand. Hesitantly, he picked up a blue crayon and drew a house with a red roof and brown walls. But the door was missing. "That's beautiful, Ethan," she whispered. He didn't reply, but his trembling hand added a door. Behind the one-way glass, someone was watching. The weight of that gaze pressed through the glass, cold as steel, making Victoria aware of every beat of her heart. When the session ended, she stepped into the hallway and froze. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. The light glinted off his dark hair, but his eyes stopped Ethan's eyes, the same stormy blue, deep and unreadable. "He said you did what no one has managed in 3 years?" His voice low-gravelly touched with an Italian-American accent. "I was doing my job." "No. You made him look at someone. You made him choose a color. You made him open a door." Victoria instinctively tightened her grip on her purse. "Mr. Rhodes, I can't promise results. The boy needs time, not miracles." "I don't believe in miracles," he said quietly, his eyes darkening. "I believe in results, and I want you to work full-time for me privately. You'll be paid 10 times your rate." She gave a faint, ironic smile. "Do you think I'm something you can buy? I buy outcomes, not people." Victoria studied him. His face was sculpted almost too perfect, but she sensed something raw beneath that cold marble exterior. Something broken. "I'll help, Ethan," she said softly, "but in my clinic." "My way. Are you setting conditions for me now?" she replied, meeting his gaze. "I'm stating a truth. You can't control healing with power." Dylan's lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. "People don't usually say no to me, Miss Reynolds." "Then consider me an exception." She turned and walked away, her heels tapping against the marble floor, echoing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Behind her, his voice followed low, smooth, and dark as wind in an alley. "I'll know everything about you before dawn." No one says no to Dylan Rhodes without making him curious. Victoria paused at the doorway, but didn't look back. Curiosity, Mr. Rhodes, is often the beginning of mistakes, and sometimes of things you'll never forget. She walked faster, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and the piercing gaze that followed her until she disappeared around the corner. Victoria stood by the window in her small apartment overlooking the Charles River that night. The distant city lights shimmered in her honey-brown eyes. She thought of the boy and his house without a door, of the man with the storm in his gaze. His name, Dylan Rhodes, made Boston feel colder by a few degrees. The phone buzzed again. The screen read unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Still awake, Miss Reynolds?" That voice, deep calm, commanding the voice of a man used to owning the world. "You just wanted to make sure you got home safe. Boston's not friendly at night. I don't need your protection. Maybe not, but I protect what matters to me." His tone was soft as wind, yet it made her throat tighten. "Good night, Victoria." The line clicked dead. She stared at the blank screen, a strange feeling stirring in her chest. Not fear, but a sense that something had begun. Something unstoppable, like the snow falling outside, silent, persistent until dawn. She didn't yet know that her fate had been rewritten from that moment on. And love, the kind she thought belonged only to ordinary people, was coming for her in the form of the most dangerous man in Chicago. If you believe that sometimes destiny doesn't knock, it breaks down the door. Follow me to part 2, where Victoria begins to realize that healing a child may mean unlocking the heart of the man who caused the wound. The next morning, Boston was damp and chilled by fog. Victoria made herself a cup of coffee, but the scent did little to wash away the echo lingering in her mind of Dylan Rhodes' voice from the midnight call. It was like a low note that refused to fade, looping endlessly, making it nearly impossible for her to focus on work. Files were stacked across her desk. Patient reports, progress notes, therapy charts. She opened one and tried to read, but all she could see was Ethan, that quiet boy with forest green eyes, and the house without a door. At precisely 10 o'clock, her phone buzzed. "Miss Reynolds, someone wants to speak with you." Natalie's voice came softly, tinged with unease. "Who is it? I'm not sure I should say. He's at the reception desk." "And trust me, you'll want to come down." Victoria frowned. Her footsteps echoed against the polished wooden floor of her clinic. When the door opened, the air seemed to shift. Dylan Rhodes stood there, framed by the morning light streaming through the glass. Black shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. Hair slightly tousled, as if he'd just left a meeting that ran too long. His gaze met hers, sharp as ice, yet holding a trace of warmth that didn't belong there. "I told you I don't work privately for anyone," she said first, her tone firm. Dylan smiled faintly, the kind of smile that felt dangerous. "I'm not here to hire you. I'm here to ask permission. Permission to bring my son here. 3 sessions a week. No bodyguards, no interference. Just you and him." She was caught off guard by his tone, not by the request. It wasn't a command. It was a request. "If you keep that promise, I'll agree. I don't make promises I can't keep, Victoria." He said her name like it was something he'd weighed carefully, each syllable deliberate, carrying its own gravity. "Then I'll see you on Tuesday." Before leaving, his gaze drifted to a framed photo on the wall, a childhood picture of Victoria with her parents, her face glowing in summer sunlight. He paused longer than a moment. "They look kind," he murmured. "Good people always leave a space that's impossible to fill." Her breath hitched. One sentence, and it was as if he'd peeled back a part of her she never showed anyone. "You really did investigate me, didn't you?" He turned, eyes glinting with something between challenge and intrigue. "I told you I don't let anyone important into my world without knowing who they are." She fell silent. The phrase "anyone important" made her pulse falter, but she quickly brushed it off. Men like Dylan Rhodes never spoke without purpose. Every word was a move. A black Bentley pulled up in front of her small Beacon Hill clinic 3 days later. The car door opened, and Ethan stepped out, clutching his father's hand. He looked smaller than 6, pale, withdrawn, lost. Dylan bent low and whispered something to him in quiet Italian. Victoria caught the flicker of the boy's glance, brief and nervous, before he looked away. She knelt to his level and smiled softly. "Hello, Ethan. What do you want to draw today?" He said nothing, his little shoulders trembling. Dylan started to speak, but she raised her hand. "You should let us be alone. Trust me, the most dangerous thing here is a father the child doesn't yet understand." Dylan hesitated, then nodded. He stepped outside, standing by the glass door, watching. Always watching. Inside, Victoria spread sheets of paper across the floor and scattered colors everywhere. She didn't press him or ask questions. She began to draw. A small cat is sleeping in the sunlight. A cloud shaped like a heart. Slowly, Ethan joined her, his fingers brushing the blue crayon. This time he didn't draw a house. He drew a faceless woman holding a child's hand in silhouette. Then, using gray, he pulled another figure standing far away, tall, alone in the rain. "Who is this?" Victoria asked gently. The boy didn't answer. He slid the paper toward her. A single tear rolled down his cheek, landing in the middle of the drawing. She touched his small hand softly and whispered, "It's okay, Ethan. Every storm stops eventually." Outside the glass, Dylan's hand clenched in his pocket. His expression flickered with pain and hope colliding. When the session ended, Victoria packed up her things ready to leave, only to find Dylan still waiting by the wall, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a coffee cup. "I thought you'd gone. I never leave without waiting for my son. You don't trust anyone, do you?" "I do. But only what I can control." She gave a soft, ironic laugh. "And you think you can control me?" Dylan tilted his head slightly, that dangerous smile ghosting across his lips. "No, but I'm very curious why I can't." The words caught her off guard. He stepped closer enough that she could feel his warmth smell the faint spice of his cologne. "Ethan hasn't drawn a person since his mother died," he said quietly, his gaze locking on hers. But today, he pulled a woman standing beside him. "Do you know what that means, Victoria? It means he's beginning to trust the world again." "No," his voice lowered, intimate, steady. "It means he's beginning to trust you." The air thickened between them. Dylan's eyes were a storm, the kind that pulled and consumed. She forced a small laugh to break the tension. "You're overanalyzing. Children see things differently. It's not that deep." He said nothing for a moment, then murmured, "Maybe. But from now on, you'll see a lot more of me. Meaning what exactly I want Ethan to have his space. But I also want to understand the woman who made my son dream again." She didn't know how to respond. The last light of day filtered through the glass, washing over his face, a strange mix of warmth and shadow life and loss. When Victoria returned home that evening, an envelope lay neatly by her door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph of her holding Ethan's hand during that morning's session. Beneath it, written in black ink, "No one touches Rhodes's blood without getting stained." Her stomach turned to ice. Someone had been watching. But who, Dylan? An enemy. Someone from the hospital. She locked the door and checked the windows, her palms slick with sweat. The walls felt closer than they should. She reached for her phone to call Natalie, then stopped. No, she couldn't drag anyone else into this. Her finger hovered before pressing a name she never thought she'd save, Dylan Rhodes. After 2 rings, he answered. "I assume you've received it." "You knew?" "In my world, Victoria, nothing stays hidden for long. But I underestimated how fast my enemies move." "Enemies? I'm just a speech therapist. You stepped into my world the night at St. Luke's. My wife's death wasn't an accident. And now, they know your name." Her grip on the phone tightened. "Are you saying I've been pulled into your war, no, Victoria? I'm saying I won't let anyone touch you." His voice was low, not loud, but carrying something that made her shiver. It was a promise, or a warning, maybe both. "Starting tomorrow, you're not driving yourself. I'll have someone pick you up." "No, I don't need that. This isn't up for negotiation." She started to protest, but his voice cut clean through. "When I say I'll protect you, it means I will whether you like it." She went silent. Part of her wanted to be angry. Another part, the quieter, more fragile part, felt a strange sense of safety. Before hanging up, his voice softened to a whisper as though he were beside her. "You shouldn't be afraid of me, Victoria. What you should fear, those who want me to lose everything." The line went dead, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat and the wind against the window pane. She walked to the window and peered out. The street was empty, but far down the block, a black SUV sat motionless, headlights off the faint orange glow of a street lamp glinting off its windshield. Someone was inside, watching, waiting. That night, sleep never came. Her mind replayed 2 images repeatedly, Dylan's elusive smile and the threat scrawled beneath that photograph. She knew then that she was no longer just an observer. And perhaps Ethan wasn't the only one in that house who needed healing. Morning in Boston was wrapped in a thin veil of fog, the scent of roasted coffee, drifting from the corner cafe mixing with the icy air. Victoria stepped out of her apartment, pulling her wool coat tightly around her shoulders. Across the street, a black SUV sat motionless like a shadow that had lingered after the rain. She didn't need to look closely to know who had sent them. Part of her wanted to be angry. The feeling of being watched ignited a spark of defiance. But another part felt safer. Maybe Dylan was right. His world had no room for innocence. When the car stopped before her clinic, she stepped out trying to appear calm. Inside the waiting room, Ethan sat quietly clutching a small teddy bear. Dylan stood a few steps away, wearing a charcoal gray coat, tall and still like a tower rising from the mist. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. No words. Just a nod was enough to make her heart beat faster than it should. The session began in silence. Ethan sat at the small wooden table lining up his crayons perfectly straight, a ritual of control. Victoria sat across from him saying nothing. She waited. After a moment, the boy picked up a red crayon, drew a long streak, then stopped glancing at her as if to see what she'd do. "What's that?" "Ethan?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he touched his throat, then lowered his hand. Victoria recognized a child's silent gesture, remembering something that terrified him. She smiled gently, her voice calm and steady. "You don't have to speak, just keep drawing." He continued, drawing a black line slashing across the red, then a thin band of blue loops around it, as if trying to protect or conceal it. Victoria's throat tightened. She could feel the tremor in his small hand, even from across the table. Quietly, she drew beside him a door half open, with golden light spilling from inside. "If there's a place where you feel safe," she whispered, "draw it here." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he bent forward, picked up a green crayon, and drew 2 figures by the door. One small child, one taller woman. Victoria's voice was barely audible. "Thank you, Ethan." Outside the glass wall, Dylan stood watching. He couldn't hear what they said, but he saw everything, Ethan's small hands moving the boy's face, softening just a little. And with sunlight tracing her hair, Victoria looked like something from a world he'd long stopped believing he could touch. When the session ended, Victoria walked them to the door. For the first time, Ethan held her hand without hesitation. "Thank you," Dylan said, his voice lower than usual. "He slept after yesterday's session." "That hasn't happened in 3 years." "I'm just doing my job," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "Maybe, but your job seems to heal things I thought couldn't be healed." She flinched slightly, but he had already turned away. The late afternoon light cast his shadow long across the wet pavement, close yet distant like a man standing between 2 worlds. That night, when she returned home, her door was slightly ajar. Her heart clenched. Her hand trembled on the key. She pushed it open slowly. Everything inside looked untouched, except for a single red rose placed neatly on the dining table beside a small folded note. "Don't fear what he's protecting you from. Fear him." The handwriting was slanted uneven. No signature. She heard a car pass by outside headlights sweeping across the window before vanishing. Victoria sat down, still holding the note. The back of her neck tingled cold. Dylan's image flashed in her mind momentarily, the stormy green eyes, the unreadable smile, and his promise, "I won't let anyone touch you." If he was the danger, why did being near him feel like the only place she was safe? The next morning, Dylan arrived early. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, just a dark sweater and jeans. He looked younger, but the sharpness in his eyes hadn't faded polished steel beneath calm water. "I need to speak with you privately," he said as she finished her morning session. She led him into her office and closed the door. "What's going on?" He placed an envelope on her desk. Inside were 2 things, the same photo of her holding Ethan's hand, and the exact threatening note she had received the night before. "You've been watching me now. I've been protecting you." "What's the difference?" she snapped, voice trembling. "I can't live in a golden cage just because you think you have the right to control me." Dylan didn't answer. He just looked at her long enough to make her feel like he could see through every layer she tried to hide behind. Finally, he said quietly, "You don't understand, Victoria. When people want to destroy me, they start with what I fear losing most. And right now, that's you." The words drained the air from the room. She wanted to deny it, to argue, but the truth in his tone stopped her. Beneath his cold composure was something real fear, the kind that only exists in those who've already lost everything once. "So what are you planning to do?" "Keep you safe, by tracking me 24 hours a day, by any means necessary." His voice lowered no longer, commanding, almost pleading. "Please don't leave Boston for now. And don't trust anyone, not even me, unless I come to you myself." Victoria froze. "Why not trust you?" "Sometimes I don't even know if I'm still one of the good guys." For a heartbeat, the room fell utterly silent. She looked at him, this man holding himself together by sheer will, as if one wrong breath would unleash the storm inside him. Then he left. No goodbye. Only the faint trace of his cologne lingered, amber and oak, mixed with danger and loss. Late that night, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold, detached. "If you stay near him, you'll be the next to go silent forever." The phone slipped from her hand. A faint, distorted laugh echoed, then the line went dead. She called Dylan. He picked up almost instantly. "I told you not to be afraid. But this time you need to listen to me. They called me. They said I know. They want you to leave me. But don't. If you disappear, I can't control what happens next. You can't keep making my choices for me. I'm not choosing for you, Victoria." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm begging you." She heard something raw beneath his armor for the first time, fear, vulnerability, truth. "I'm sending someone right now. Stay in the brightest room you have. Don't open the door for anyone." She sat huddled beneath the yellow light, watching her reflection tremble in the window pane. Outside, rain began to fall hard and relentlessly. A few minutes later came a knock. 3 times short, then long. She hesitated. "Who's there?" A deep, rough voice answered. "It's Dylan. Open up." Her heart pounded. He couldn't have arrived that fast. She moved closer, hand on the lock, then stopped. His warning echoed in her head. "Don't trust anyone, not even me, unless I come to you in person." She froze. "If it's really you, say something only we would know." Silence. Then the voice replied, soft but exact. "Every storm ends, doesn't it, Victoria?" She exhaled shakily, unlocking the door. When it opened, Dylan stood there drenched in rain, his green eyes glinting in the dark. And in that moment, between the howl of the wind and the pounding of her heart, she knew she had just crossed a line. Between safety and danger. Between reason and desire. And maybe there was no way back. Rain poured over Boston as if trying to wash away everything left unsaid. When Victoria opened the door, Dylan stood there, his hair drenched, his shirt clinging to the solid frame beneath. His breath came fast, his green eyes glinting in the hallway light, wild and heavy with something unspoken. "Is it really you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Dylan gave a slight nod, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. The scent of rain and his cologne mingled in the dense, intoxicating, and almost suffocating air. He stood still momentarily, as if making sure she was truly safe, then spoke in a low, rougher than usual voice. "Someone tried to breach the security system in this area. They're watching you, Victoria." She took a step back, gripping the edge of the table. "I told you I don't belong in your world. I'm just a therapist. I shouldn't be part of this." He said, "You're not part of it," his tone quiet but resolute. "You're a target because they think you matter to me. And they're right." She turned away, her pulse racing. "Matter." That single word burned through her chest. Hot, frightening, alive. You can't just show up whenever you want. I can't live like this, feeling like someone else is deciding for me. I didn't come because I wanted to. I came because I had to. His gaze tightened the air between them. Under the soft amber light, his face was drawn and weary, but fear was new in his eyes. He took a step closer, closing the space between them. His voice dropped raw and honest. "I've lost too much. I don't dare to lose another person." Victoria froze. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the rain and the sound of their uneven breathing. She tried to steady her voice. "You talk as if you care about me." Dylan gave a faint, pained smile. "If I denied it, would you believe me?" She couldn't answer. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He lifted his hand as if to touch her cheek, but stopped midway, afraid he might break something fragile. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured almost to himself. "Everyone around me becomes a target. But every time I imagine you getting hurt, I can't breathe." Victoria looked at him, and in his eyes she no longer saw the ruthless king the papers described, but a man desperate to find what was left of his humanity. "Have you ever loved anyone, Dylan?" she asked softly. He didn't respond right away. His eyes drifted toward the window, where rain slashed against the glass like 1,000 tiny blades. "Yes, but that love died with the gunfire 3 years ago. Since then, I didn't think I could love again." "Then why are you here? Because you make me doubt that." A shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to speak, pull back and calm the storm inside her, but the words dissolved when his gaze met hers. Through the rain's rhythm, Dylan stepped closer. His hand brushed her cheek, and the warmth of his touch made her knees weaken. "Victoria." Her name in his voice sounded like a prayer, and before she could think, his lips touched hers, brief, soft trembling. Not the kiss of a man claiming possession, but of one who had finally touched light after years in darkness. Victoria pulled away, breath shaking. "Don't do that, Dylan." He stopped, his eyes shifting, not angry, but wounded. "I'm sorry. I can't let this happen. You're the father of my patient, and I can't lose that boundary." He nodded slowly, a faint hoarse laugh escaping him. "Boundary? Do we still have one, Victoria?" The question cut deep, not to hurt, but to remind her that perhaps that line had already been crossed. Silence hung between them. Then he straightened. "I'll go, but my men will stay outside. Don't leave your apartment tonight." He left, and the apartment filled with the scent of rain and an almost alive emptiness. Victoria sat by the window that night, staring at the quiet street. Headlights flashed across wet pavement, reflected in her honey-brown eyes. She couldn't stop thinking about Dylan's voice. "I can't breathe if you get hurt." That feeling both softened and terrified her. In Dylan's world, love means danger, and she was becoming the heart of that storm. The next morning, she arrived early at the clinic. Ethan was already there, waiting, his small eyes brighter than before. When she entered, he gave her a faint smile. It was small, but real enough to make her heart flutter. "Good morning, Ethan." He handed her a drawing. This time there was no empty house, no red and black streaks. Instead, a yellow circle around the sun, and beside it 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child holding their hands. "Is that your family?" she asked gently. The boy nodded, a flicker of light in his eyes. She smiled, but the ache came anyway. The child was dreaming again, and those dreams were built on fragments of loss. When the session ended, Dylan entered quietly. He looked at the drawing in her hands, then crouched down, tracing one of the messy lines with his finger. He hasn't drawn me in 3 years. Today he put me next to him. His voice cracked slightly. Victoria looked up, meeting the gaze of a father who had finally been allowed to hope. Ethan's starting to believe in something good again, Dylan. But to help him, you need to think too. Believe in what? That you can be someone else, not just the name people fear. Dylan said nothing for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly, tiredly. You give me too much credit, Victoria. I'm made of blood and shadows. Men like me don't change. We learn to hide the worst parts. I don't believe that. Their eyes locked, and Dylan saw his reflection in hers for a moment. Not as a powerful man, not as a killer, but as a human being longing to be forgiven. As evening fell, just before she left the clinic, Dylan said quietly, I have to go back to Chicago tonight. There are things I need to settle. But I'll leave my people here to protect you. You don't have to do that. I don't believe in safety, Victoria. I believe in action. He stepped closer, stopping just within reach. If anyone asks who I am, tell them I'm no hero. But at least this time, I'll fight for something real. His gaze lingered on her lips. Then he turned and walked away. She stood there watching his silhouette disappear through the doorway, her heartbeat tangled and uneven. No matter how hard she tried to deny it, she knew what was growing inside her wasn't curiosity or sympathy anymore. It was love. A love born in the wrong place at the wrong time, yet so true it hurt. That night, Dylan sat aboard his private jet bound for Chicago. Outside, the sky was ink black. He stared at his phone at the photo of Victoria smiling beside Ethan. His thumb brushed across the screen, as if afraid the image might shatter. From the opposite seat, Sergio, his right-hand man, spoke quietly. Are you sure about this, sir? Going back to Chicago now is dangerous. Danger is constant, Sergio. But this time, I'm done running. Sergio said nothing more. Dylan leaned back, closing his eyes. And the last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was Victoria's brown eyes, the look that made him believe, if only for a moment, that even a man swallowed by darkness could still be touched by light. Outside, lightning cracked across the horizon, flashing against the jet's silver wings. And deep inside Dylan Rhodes, the real storm had just begun. Chicago didn't sleep that night. From the plane window, the city lights glimmered like a golden web against an ocean of black. Dylan sat still, his eyes fixed on the view below, though his mind was far away. He could still hear Victoria's voice softly, gently unwavering. You can become someone else if you choose to. Those words, so simple, had reached the deepest part of him, the part that still longed to be human. When the jet landed at his private airfield on the outskirts of Chicago, Sergio was already waiting, his face tense. Things aren't good, sir. The Bratva moved faster than expected. We've got a leak inside our network. Dylan's jaw tightened. Who we suspect, Marcus. The name hit like a blow. Marcus, the man who had saved his life in Palermo, the one he'd trusted for years. Dylan said nothing. He slipped on his coat, his voice cold as the midnight wind. Don't act yet. If he betrayed me, I'll look him in the eye when I find out why. Meanwhile, back in Boston, Victoria couldn't sleep. Her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. He's gone. You're free now. She clenched the device, a strange unease rising in her chest. Free? The word didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a warning. Outside her window, a figure stood under the streetlight smoking. The tiny glow of the cigarette flared, catching in her reflection. She couldn't tell if it was one of Dylan's men or someone else. She closed the curtain, feeling the hollowness of knowing he was gone. The Rhodes mansion loomed over the night in Chicago, silent, vast, and cold. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor as Dylan stepped through the door. On the wall, the portrait of his late wife watched him from above the grand staircase. Her painted eyes seemed to whisper, You've changed too much, Dylan. He exhaled quietly. If you were still here, you wouldn't recognize me either. Behind him, Sergio spoke. Marcus is in the wine room. He doesn't know you're back. Dylan walked down the hall, every step heavier than the last. The scent of whiskey and smoke thickened as he entered. Marcus sat at the table, twirling a knife between his fingers. When he saw Dylan, he smirked. You'd come back sooner or later. I thought I taught you never to betray family. Family, Marcus sneered. I believed that once, until I realized you'd trade everything for a woman who doesn't belong to this world. Dylan froze. Victoria has nothing to do with this. She's your weakness, Dylan. The predators out there smell blood. She'll be the weapon that breaks you. The room thickened with silence. The amber light cast their shadows on the wall. Two men bound by loyalty, now divided by truth. One, a brother who'd lost faith. The other, a man staring into the darkness he'd built. Dylan spoke softly, almost mournfully. You were my brother once, Marcus. Once. The gunshot cracked like thunder. The whiskey glass shattered. When the smoke cleared, Marcus lay still, eyes open, lifeless. The last remnant of loyalty had died with him. Dylan stood there for a long time. No words, no expression. He poured another drink and downed it in silence. Only his trembling hand betrayed what he would never admit. 2 days later, in Boston, Victoria was helping Ethan pronounce simple words. He had begun to speak again shyly, but surely mom, light, home. Her smile trembled as tears slipped down her cheeks. Not of sorrow, but of hope. Then the door burst open. A man in a black suit stood there, his expression grave. "I'm sorry, Miss Reynolds. Dylan Rhodes requests your presence." "Immediately. He's in Boston number in Chicago." Victoria shook her head. "I can't. I have Ethan. The boy will be safe, but if you don't come, Dylan may not survive the night." Her heart stopped for a beat. No explanation was needed. She understood something was happening, something final. The night flight from Boston to Chicago felt endless. Snow had begun to fall, thin white soundless, when the plane touched down. The man who escorted her said nothing. He drove her straight to the Rhodes estate. The iron gates groaned open. The mansion stood in dim light, silent as a tomb. Victoria stepped inside, the chill creeping up her spine. Sergio appeared, his face grave. "Where is he?" she asked, voice trembling. "In the library, but you should prepare yourself." She didn't wait. Her heels echoed down the corridor, heart racing. When she reached the doorway, it was already ajar. Dylan sat at the desk posture, rigid eyes closed. Before him lay a gun and an old photograph of his wife and son, Dylan, his eyes opened slowly. His face was drawn, sleepless. "You shouldn't have come. Your men said you needed me. They were wrong. I only needed to end this." She stepped closer, her throat tight. "End what, everything?" He stood, taking the gun from the table. "Marcus is dead. But he wasn't alone. The Bratva are coming, and they won't stop until they take what they want from me, or the woman I love." The last words froze her in place. "The woman you love is me, Dylan?" He looked at her for so long it felt like time paused. Then he nodded once. "That's the one thing I regret most. Because my love only puts you in danger." She moved closer, placing her hand over his, the one gripping the gun. "You can still run. With me. With Ethan. We can leave this all behind." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that knew how stories like his ended. "Victoria, I don't deserve peace. But you do. And I'll die before I let anyone take that from you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Don't say that. I've lived on blood and vengeance. But for the first time you made me want something else. If this is the price, I'll pay it." He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It was soft and painful so. "When this is over, tell Ethan his father was a good man." "No, Dylan. Don't you dare leave me." He stepped back, a tired smile flickering. "I already left long ago, Victoria. I just haven't stopped breathing yet." A sound shattered the moment, the crash of glass, the roar of footsteps. Sergio burst in. "Bratva's here. They've surrounded the estate." Dylan grabbed the gun, barking orders. "Get her to the bunker. Protect her with your life." "No, Dylan." Victoria screamed as Sergio dragged her away. The heavy steel door slammed behind her, sealing her from the chaos above. Then came the sounds of the gunfire, the shouting, the storm of death breaking loose. She screamed his name, her voice drowned by the echo of bullets and the howling wind outside. The smell of smoke and gunpowder filled the air, along with despair. An hour later, silence fell. The bunker door opened. Victoria ran up the stairs, slipping on the blood-stained floor. Dylan lay in the grand hall, his shoulder drenched in crimson. He was alive, but barely. She fell beside him, gathering him into her arms, tears mixing with the blood on his shirt. "Don't speak. I'll call for help." He shook his head faintly. "Don't be afraid, Victoria. Every storm ends someday." The words broke off. Then silence. Outside, snow fell thick over the city, covering Chicago in a quiet white shroud. In her arms, Dylan Rhodes closed his eyes, the man the world called a monster. Yet to her, he was the only one who had ever shown her what love truly meant, even if it existed only for a heartbeat between darkness and light. 3 weeks after the attack, Chicago was still buried beneath a blanket of snow. The city seemed stripped of sound, left only with the wind whistle weaving through the high-rise towers. In a private ward of St. Mary's Hospital, pale light fell across the motionless figure of Dylan Rhodes. He was alive but silent, suspended somewhere between two worlds. Victoria sat beside his bed, her hand gently clasping his. Beneath her fingertips, his skin was cold, the pulse faint but steady. Each beat whispered the same fragile truth: he was still here. She had stayed by his side for 3 weeks, rarely leaving the room. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, her hair slightly tangled, but in her gaze, one thing refused to die: hope. Every day she spoke to him as if he could hear her about Ethan, about the last drawing he made about the little house by the coast of Maine she had always dreamed of. "You once said Every storm ends someday. Her voice trembled softly. But you never taught me what to do when the snow doesn't stop falling. Outside, the wind howled, spinning snowflakes in circles. Light from the street lamps glimmered across the glass, pulsing faintly, like the slow heartbeat of the sleeping city. When Victoria entered the hallway to find a nurse, she ran into Sergio. He still wore his dark suit and heavy coat, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. "He's the same," she asked quietly. Sergio nodded. "The medication keeps his body stable, but his mind, it hasn't come back. It's like he's fighting somewhere between life and death." Her throat tightened. "I used to think Dylan Rhodes only knew how to command and fight. But when he fell, I realized he had never really lived." Sergio's expression softened. "You're not like anyone who's ever gotten close to him. No one made Dylan believe in anything good until you did." "He has to wake up," she whispered. "Not so I can believe in miracles, but so he can believe in himself." Sergio hesitated, then spoke quietly. "We found something in his coat the night of the attack, a letter he had never had the chance to send." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, his voice rough. "This belongs to you." Victoria took it. The handwriting was instantly familiar, bold and precise, but the final strokes trembled as if written in haste. "Victoria, if you're reading this, I've gone somewhere you can't follow. But know this, for the first time in my life, I didn't want to die because you made me want to live. If there's another life, I hope I'm no longer Dylan Rhodes, just an ordinary man who can say your name without blood on his hands. Thank you for showing me what light feels like, even if I only saw it briefly. DR." By the final line, her vision blurred. The paper soaked with tears until the ink faded, as if the words themselves wanted to vanish into the air. That night, she returned to his room and placed the letter on his chest, over the heart that still beat faintly beneath bandages. "Dylan, you said you didn't want to die. Then please, don't." Outside the window, the wind shifted, and in that moment, a faint tremor ran through his hand. She looked up. His eyelids fluttered. There was movement for the first time in 3 weeks, and life was returning. "Dylan, can you hear me?" No words came, only a shaky breath escaping his pale lips. But to her, that was enough. It was a miracle. 3 days later, Dylan opened his eyes. Dim white light glowed against the ceiling. Pain burned in his shoulder, and the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the room. When his vision cleared, he saw Victoria sleeping at his bedside, her fingers still wrapped around his hand. A weak smile tugged at his lips. He'd been standing in a snowfield in the long dream he had drifted through. Far away there was light, and she was there smiling, calling his name. Now he knew he'd found his way back. "Victoria." His voice rasped rough and faint. She stirred, blinked, then shot upright, eyes glistening. "You're awake." "Dylan." He gave a faint grin, his tone still edged with that familiar, astonishing arrogance. "I guess I still owe you that dinner." She laughed through her tears. "You idiot, you wake up and the first thing you think of is jokes." "If I don't joke," he murmured, voice breaking, "I might start crying." For the first time, she saw the vulnerability of a man who had once ruled the underworld, now learning to be fragile in front of someone who saw him as more than his sins. When strong enough, Dylan was moved to a lakeside villa near Lake Michigan, quiet, distant from the chaos. Snow still fell outside, but the sky was brighter now. Each morning, Victoria sat by the window and read to him sometimes old novels, sometimes her favorite poems. One afternoon, she read softly, "Love is not light, but lets us see what the darkness hides." He listened, eyes fixed on the snowfall beyond the glass. "Do you believe that I do? Because I'm living proof of it." He turned toward her, gaze steady. "If we could start over, would you choose me, Victoria?" She was silent for a moment, then set the book down and whispered, "I wouldn't have to choose you. Fate already did." A small smile curved his lips. His hand, still wrapped in bandages, reached for hers. "You know I used to think love was weakness, but watching you sit beside my bed every day, I realized it's the only strength that makes life worth fighting for." Victoria's eyes shimmered, but her voice was calm. "You don't have to be anyone else to be loved, Dylan. Just be the man who knows how to love and dares to." He lowered his head, pressing his lips gently to the back of her hand, a quiet gesture that spoke louder than any promise. That afternoon, they stepped outside for the first time in weeks. Lake Michigan stretched endlessly before them, the surface still in silver beneath a pale sky. Victoria stood beside him, the wind tugging at her hair. Dylan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Do you remember Ethan's drawing, the one with 3 people under the sun?" "I do. I still have it. I think we can make it real." She turned to him, eyes wide. "You mean I want to leave Chicago? Leave all of this behind you, me and Ethan? Somewhere with no blood, no vengeance. Just the sea, the wind. And you." She smiled faintly, her voice soft as the breeze. "It sounds like a dream." He said, "I never believed in dreams. Eyes glinting until you stood in one of mine." They stood silently, The world hushed except for the distant sound of waves. Then Dylan turned to her, his hand finding hers. "Can you forgive a man like me, Victoria?" She tightened her fingers around his, whispering, "Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about freeing love from the weight of the past." Dylan bent down and kissed her tenderly, meaningfully. Not the kiss of power or possession, but one of surrender of two broken souls choosing to begin again. Above them, the snow stopped falling. A pale beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, brushing their shoulders like a quiet promise. And in that moment, Dylan Rhodes, the man the world once feared, finally learned how to stand still in peace as the woman he loved led him out of the darkness and into the light. By March, the ice on Lake Michigan had begun to thaw. The water shimmered faintly under the pale sunlight, and the first migrating birds returned, sketching free, elegant arcs across the sky. Victoria stood by the tall window of the lakeside villa, holding a cup of coffee gone cold. She stared silently outside where Dylan was walking carefully along the moss-covered stone path. The wound on his shoulder had healed, but each step was still deliberate, as if he were relearning how to exist. The doctor said he was lucky. The bullet had missed his heart by less than 2 centimeters, just a little further, and he would have been gone. But Victoria didn't believe in luck. To her, destiny was a strange fate that had bound them together through blood and tears. Darkness and a fragile faith that flickered like a candle in the wind. She exhaled softly, set her cup down, and slipped on a coat before stepping outside. The March air smelled of damp earth and the faint green of new life pushing through the snow. Dylan turned when he heard her footsteps, his eyes softening, his lips curving into one of his rare smiles. "You came out without a scarf?" he asked, his voice rough but warm. "If I wore one more thing, you'd say I look like an old lady," she teased, her smile brightening the gray afternoon. He chuckled, a sound she had grown used to, but one that still made her heart tremble each time. He wasn't the same man with the glacial stare she'd met months ago. The scars on his body remained, but now something new and light lived in his eyes. "You're really thinking of leaving Chicago?" she asked after a pause. Dylan nodded. "I've spoken to my people. Sergio will handle everything within a few weeks. There's a small house in Maine by the sea. No one knows my real name there. We could start over you, me, and Ethan." Victoria looked out toward the lake. The rippling surface caught the fading sunlight like a restless heartbeat. "Do you believe in new beginnings, Dylan?" He stepped behind her, his voice low, steady. "I don't know if they truly exist, but I know one thing: I don't want my story to end here." She turned to face him. Under the golden hue of the sunset, his face looked gentler than she had ever seen it. The man who once made the world tremble now seemed to want nothing more than peace. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of my past, no. Of loving you again, and losing everything all over." Dylan didn't answer. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather-light, but full of unspoken promises. That night, they had dinner together in the small kitchen. The only sounds were the clinking of utensils and the wind whispering outside. The old housekeeper, Sophia, had returned to Italy, leaving them a rare silence. Dylan sat across from Victoria, the soft glow of the lamp reflecting in his emerald eyes. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You know, sometimes I think maybe dying that night was a kind of punishment. Punishment I lived too long on blood and vengeance. Maybe God wanted me to taste helplessness to learn that life can't be bought and love can't be commanded." Victoria smiled faintly, though sadness lingered behind it. "God didn't punish you, Dylan. He just sent it to me so you could realize that yourself." He held her gaze for a long time, then murmured, "If that's true, I'm afraid he might take you back one day." "I'm not a temporary gift, Dylan." Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm here because I choose to be. No one, not even fate, can take that away." Silence fell again, gentle and heavy. In the dim light, they looked at each other. There are moments when words become unnecessary, when hearts do all the speaking. That night, snow began to fall again, thin and ghost-like. Dylan sat by the fireplace reading reports from Sergio. Victoria came up behind him and draped a blanket over his shoulders. "Still working while you're supposed to be resting? I can't quit everything overnight, but I'm learning to slow down." "Good, because tomorrow we're going to pick up Ethan." A spark lit in his eyes. "He misses you terribly. You're the only one who can make him laugh for real. And you're the one who makes him feel safe." Dylan looked up, surprise and emotion flickering in his gaze. He had always believed he was the source of fear, never safety. Yet in Victoria's eyes, he had become shelter. That realization shook him more deeply than any wound. He reached for her hand, drawing her close. "Victoria, if you had to choose between peace and me, which would you choose?" She didn't hesitate. "You. Even if peace never comes back, then I'll learn to live inside the storm as long as you're in it." He laughed softly, but his eyes shimmered. A tear rolled down his cheek, catching the firelight. Embarrassedly, he turned away, but Victoria touched his face, wiping it away gently. "Don't be ashamed of your tears, Dylan. I love the man behind the mask, not the armor he used to wear." The next morning, they drove to Ethan's therapy school when the boy ran out shouting, "Papa Dylan froze." He hadn't heard that word in years. He knelt, opened his arms, and held his son tightly. Victoria watched, her eyes glistening. In that moment, she saw that the man who had lived in shadows was finally stepping into the light, not through power, but through love. After lunch, the three returned to the house by the lake. Ethan chattered happily, drawing pictures of three people together this time, not with dark, twisted lines, but with sunshine waves and a little house by the sea. Dylan hung the drawing on the living room wall. "See, he believes we're a real family now," Victoria smiled softly. "Because to him, we already are." As evening descended, the sky turned amber and gold. Victoria sat on the couch, her head resting on Dylan's shoulder, while Ethan slept peacefully in her arms. "You know," Dylan murmured, "sometimes I feel like I don't deserve this." "If you don't, then who does?" she whispered. "You fought to get here, Dylan. You earned this day." He tightened his arm around her, his voice low, almost breaking. "I'm just afraid this happiness is too fragile. Like the last light of the day, one breeze is gone." She lifted her gaze to him, her eyes soft but firm. "No one can take away the happiness we choose to protect, not the Mafia or darkness. It's ours, Dylan. It's faith." He looked at her for a long time, then kissed her forehead. "You are my faith, Victoria." When the last traces of sunlight faded, the house lights flickered on. In the corner, the old clock ticked steadily, like the heartbeat of a new life just beginning. Dylan stood quietly watching the two people he loved most. Victoria and Ethan, as they dozed together on the couch, their faces peaceful. For the first time, he wished time would stop. But outside in the thin mist around the lake, a shadow stood watching. Footprints marked the snow beneath his boots, leading toward the woods. On his shoulder, a tattoo gleamed faintly, the sigil of the Bratva, the Russian Mafia family Dylan believed had died with Viktor Morozov. A gust of wind swept through, carrying a faint, chilling laugh, soft as a warning. Inside the house, Dylan suddenly looked up, his eyes sharpened, instincts stirring. Something was wrong. He stepped toward the door and stared into the darkness where the snow had begun to fall again. Peace, he realized, was never permanent in his world. And this time, Dylan Rhodes knew the shadows were coming back. That night, the Chicago sky was starless. Snow fell in soft, thin layers, so gentle it almost fooled the world into believing it was asleep. But inside Dylan, a colder wind stirred a familiar chill, the instinct a man never loses after living too long among blood and betrayal. He stood by the living room window, eyes fixed on the faint line of trees beyond the lake. Out there, somewhere between the drifting flakes, something moved. A shadow. Then nothing. Victoria appeared in the doorway, a thin robe draped over her shoulders. She saw the tension in his stance, tight shoulders, and deep gaze, as if searching through ghosts. "You're not sleeping?" she asked softly. Dylan turned, a faint, weary smile crossing his lips. "No, I thought I heard something outside. It's probably just the wind," she reassured him, stepping closer, resting her hand on his arm. "You're still too alert, Dylan." He said nothing. His eyes were not filled with fear, but memory, the kind of memory that came from too many nights surviving on the edge of death. But when her hand rested over his, the storm inside him eased. "You made a promise, Dylan," she whispered. "You chose peace. Don't let the past pull you back." He nodded faintly. "I'll try for you." The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the curtains. Ethan ran across the living room laughing, clutching his stuffed bear. His laughter filled the house with a sound Dylan had once thought he'd never hear again. He watched his son with eyes that softened into something almost unrecognizable peace. Victoria was making breakfast in the kitchen, her hair glowing gold beneath the morning light. Dylan walked up behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. "Have I told you you cook better than any chef in Manhattan?" She laughed, tilting her head back against his shoulder. "You should have said that long ago. I was waiting for the right moment." For a brief time, it felt like the world had finally stopped spinning. The scars, the nightmares all faded in the warmth of that quiet morning. It almost felt like home. By noon, a letter arrived with no return name, the paper smelling faintly of gunpowder. The handwriting was narrow, slanted. Dylan unfolded it, reading the words slowly. "Rhodes. Old debts never die. He's coming back. No signature, only a small red stamp of a wolf's head. The mark of the Bratva." He closed the letter, veins tightening beneath his skin. For a moment, everything inside him went still. Sergio was in Maine, finalizing their new house. No one else was here, only Victoria and Ethan. They were already in the storm's center if this warning was real. He tucked the letter into his coat pocket, steadying his breath. But Victoria, reading the shadow in his eyes, asked softly, "Something's wrong." He hesitated. "Just unfinished business. From before." Her gaze was calm but unyielding. "I told you before, Dylan. If you have a past, share it with me. Don't hide." He gave a faint smile, one that never reached his eyes. "I will. Just not tonight." By late afternoon, the sky turned a pale copper. Dylan left the house telling her he needed to collect some documents for their move. In truth, he drove south to the old docks where the Bratva once smuggled their shipments. The wind was biting. Rusted containers stood like tombs, and seagulls cried hoarsely over the water. In the middle of the open yard, a man was waiting in a long black coat hood low over his face. When Dylan approached, the man's voice slid through the cold air. "I thought you were dead, Rhodes." Dylan narrowed his eyes. "So did I, Victor." Victor Morosev, the man Dylan had believed was executed by the Bratva 2 years ago. Yet he was alive, smiling like someone who'd crawled back from hell. "You know why I'm still alive? Because I hadn't finished collecting what's mine." "And what's that, your heart, Dylan Rhodes?" From afar, he took a photograph of Victoria and Ethan. "She's beautiful. And the boy? He's got your eyes." Dylan stepped forward, voice turning sharp as steel. "If you touch them, I'll make you wish you'd stayed in your grave." Victor chuckled. "You haven't changed. Still think you can protect everything you love. But this time, Rhodes, your light will be the very thing that destroys you." A gunshot cracked through the air. Dylan dove sideways, a bullet grazing his shoulder. He rolled behind a container and fired back 3 rounds, 2 hits. By the time the smoke cleared, Victor was gone. Only a blood-smeared note lay on the concrete. "If you want to save them, return to where it all began." Dylan's fists clenched. Where it began. He knew the place, the old estate on the northern outskirts. The one where he'd first met Victoria when she'd been a therapist for children scarred by violence. When he returned home, the house was dark, the doors half open. A chill climbed up his spine. He stepped inside. No sound, no movement, too quiet. On the table, a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. Victoria's. "They said they won't hurt Ethan if I go with them. Please don't come after me, Dylan. Protect our son." The words blurred. His pulse roared in his ears. The back door swung open, and the wind rattled the paper. Ethan was still there, tied loosely to a chair, eyes wide and wet with fear. Dylan rushed to him, freeing the ropes, pulling the boy into his arms. "It's all right, son. Papa's here." But his mind was already burning with one thought. She's gone. Because of me. That night, Dylan drove through the blizzard heading north. Snow whipped against the windshield. His eyes were no longer those of a man. They were those of someone ready to burn the world down. Every turn brought back memories. He'd buried gunfire, blood-broken vows. When he reached the old estate, dim light flickered from inside. The door was open. Victoria was tied to a chair in the center of the room, gagged but awake. Behind her stood Victor, gun in hand, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Right on time, Rhodes," he sneered. "You were always punctual." Dylan leveled his gun, his voice cold as a blade. "Let her go. It ends here." Victor smirked. "No, not yet. It ends when you lose the only thing you've ever loved. I want you to feel helpless just like I did." The first shot came from Dylan. It hit Victor in the shoulder, sending him stumbling back. But in that split second, Victor fired. The second shot cracked like thunder. Victoria's body jerked. The rope snapped as she fell forward, blood blooming across her shoulder. Dylan caught her before she hit the ground. "Victoria!" "Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, a faint smile trembling on her lips. "I told you not to come after me." "I couldn't," his voice broke. "I'll never let you go." She lifted her trembling hand, brushing his cheek. "You saved me once, Dylan. Now save yourself." Blood seeped through her collar, hot and scarlet. He pressed his hand to the wound, desperate, but she shook her head weakly. "Dylan, live. For him, for me." Her eyes closed slowly, a soft smile frozen in place. Outside, the snow kept falling, not white anymore, but streaked red, soaking into the stone. Dylan held her tightly, lifting his face to the ceiling, a raw cry tearing through the night. The sound echoed through the hollow house, tangled with rage, grief, love, and loss. The last lamp in the room flickered, dimming like the final breath of the woman who had melted the ice in his heart. And when dawn broke over the lake, Dylan Rhodes sat alone in the ruins of the old estate. Victoria lay still in his arms, her last breath lingering against his lips, a whisper carried by the wind. Every storm ends someday. But that morning, the storm had ended. The snow had melted, and all that remained was a man with empty green eyes who had just lost the only light his darkness had ever known. The dawn that followed was paler than any before it. Faint light filtered through a shattered window, falling across the floor. Where blood and snow had mixed into one, Dylan sat there motionless. His hand still clasping Victoria's, now cold, lifeless. The air was still heavy, broken only by the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall, each beat carving deeper into his awareness of the truth she was gone. Everything seemed to stop. No wind, no heartbeat, only emptiness spreading through his chest, a quiet ache sharper than any bullet wound. He lowered his head and whispered, "You promised you'd never leave me again, Victoria." But his words dissolved into silence. Outside, the sun rose, tinting the snow a pale gold. A ray of light touched her face, making her look almost peaceful, as if asleep. Only this time she would never wake again. When Sergio arrived, Dylan hadn't moved. His eyes were hollow, his grip so tight that blood trickled from his palm. Sergio froze for a moment, then knelt beside him. "Mr. Rhodes, the police are coming. We need to leave now." Dylan didn't react. He stared at the window, voice hoarse and distant. "You know, Sergio, I thought I understood loss once, but I never really lost anything, not until I met her." Sergio clenched his fists, his voice low but steady. "She chose to stay to protect you. Don't let her sacrifice mean nothing." Dylan's gaze hardened into focus. He leaned down, placed one final kiss on Victoria's forehead, and rose to his feet. When he turned away, his face was calm, but his eyes, once full of life, were now nothing but resolve. The resolve of a man who had reached the end of pain. 3 days later, Dylan Rhodes vanished from every record in the United States. The news spoke only of an unexplained explosion at an old mansion north of Chicago, with no survivors found. But Sergio knew better. Dylan's body wasn't among the ruins. In the underworld, whispers began to spread. Rhodes is dead. Rhodes is alive. Rhodes is hunting the last of the Bratva. No one knew the truth. Far away near the misty coast of Maine, a small wooden house stood alone by the sea. The door creaked open, and Ethan ran outside, laughter echoing in the cold air. Sergio waited on the porch, coat dusted with snow. "Morning, Ethan," he smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "I dreamed about Mama," the boy said softly. "She told Papa's still out there. He just hasn't come home yet." Sergio's hand tightened slightly as he looked at the gray and endless waves under a heavy sky. "Maybe she's right," he murmured. A week later, in Venice, Italy, a man sat alone in the corner of a quiet cafe overlooking the canal. A black coat, dark sunglasses, but his hands gripping the espresso cup were unmistakable, strong, scarred, every knuckle marked by old battles. He stared through the window where the morning light shimmered across the water like shards of glass. And in each reflection, he saw Victoria's smile, voice, and hand in his whispering. "Every storm ends someday." A little flower girl passed by holding out a white rose. "Would you like to buy one, sir? A flower for someone you love." Dylan smiled faintly. He took one and placed it gently in his cold cup of coffee. "Thank you." The girl tilted her head. "Where is she now?" He looked down, his voice soft. "Somewhere it never rains." That afternoon, Dylan walked along the cobblestone streets, sunlight falling across his face. He looked less like a ghost now, though still shadowed by loss. He stopped when he heard a clear and warm song drifting through the air. A woman's voice singing in Italian, "Chi ama davvero non muore mai," those who truly love never die. He froze. For an instant, his heart skipped a beat. The voice there was something in it, something achingly familiar. He followed the sound to a small square where a young woman was singing. She didn't look like Victoria. Her hair was shorter, her features different, but in her eyes was the same light, gentle, steadfast, as if she too knew how to calm a lost soul. Their eyes met. And for a moment, Dylan saw it all again. The rain-soaked room, the smile that defied pain, the feeling of being alive. She lowered her gaze slightly, then kept singing. He stood there for a long time in the middle of the sunlit square, letting each note break and heal something inside him. That night, Dylan returned to a small apartment overlooking the canal. He sat by the window and opened an old leather notebook. Inside were words he had written to Victoria while she was still in her coma. "If one day you leave, I won't beg you to return. I hope that wherever you go, you'll still smile the way you did the first time I saw you." His finger traced the page before he added a new line beneath it. "You kept your promise, but your smile stayed. It's in every breath I take." He closed the notebook and lifted his gaze to the night sky. Stars began to appear as small, fragile lights, yet steady. Just like her. Just like how she still lived within him. 3 years passed. The little house in Maine was now filled with laughter. Ethan had grown bright-eyed just like his mother. He often sat by the shore drawing pictures of sunlight waves and a tall man standing far away, distant, blurred in the glow of dusk. One afternoon, Sergio asked, "Who are you drawing, Ethan?" The boy smiled. "Papa. I see him in my dreams. He's always there watching me and Mama, but he never walks closer." Sergio's hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder, his heart heavy, yet strangely at peace. He knew Dylan was still alive somewhere between shadow and light, neither gone nor whole, just free at last. One June morning, aboard a small yacht leaving Venice, a man stood at the bow. The wind in his hair. In his hand, he held a small silver pendant, the only thing left of Victoria, with a picture of her and Ethan inside. Dylan looked toward the horizon where the sunrise burned gold across the water. He whispered, "Victoria, I've learned to live the way you taught me. I keep walking toward the light. Only now you're not there to hold my hand." He opened his fingers and let the pendant fall into the sea. It glimmered once under the sun, then sank slowly like a star descending into the depths. The wind rose carrying the scent of salt and something achingly familiar. And in the whisper of the waves, he could almost hear her voice. "See, Dylan. The rain has finally stopped." He closed his eyes, letting the wind brush his face, letting the ache drift away with the tide. For the first time in years, his eyes were clear, not cold, not haunted, but calm, peaceful. Far ahead, the horizon opened into light, and somewhere within that wind, it felt as if Victoria was still walking beside him, no longer in flesh, but in memory, in love that had transcended death. Because some people, even after they're gone, remain the light that guides those who stay behind. Maine, 6 years later. A summer morning draped the shoreline in a veil of mist thin as silk. Gentle waves kissed the white sand, leaving trails of light that shimmered under the newborn sun. Children's laughter carried through the breeze. Ethan, now 11, ran along the beach, his bare feet leaving prints on the damp sand. In his hands a kite shaped like a seagull soared high, its red ribbon dancing behind it. Sergio leaned against the wooden railing from afar, smiling as he watched the boy. He looked older, streaks of silver touched his hair, but his gaze remained steady kind, just as it had years ago. At his feet sat an old oak mailbox where Ethan placed a letter for his father every year, though no reply ever came. The boy stopped running, gazing out toward the endless horizon. The sunlight broke over the water, scattering like shards of glass. "Uncle Sergio," he called out, his voice bright. "Do you think Papa can see me?" Sergio smiled faintly, following the wind's direction with his eyes. "Yes. Your father never really left Ethan. He's just watching from where the light begins." Ethan nodded, then sat down and scribbled something on a blank sheet of paper. When he finished, he folded it, slipped it into a glass bottle, and tossed it into the sea. The waves received it gently and carried it away as if taking a small wish. On the salt-damp paper, the words were clear. "Papa, I still paint like Mama taught me. I hope wherever you are, you're smiling too." Thousands of miles away, under the Mediterranean sky, a man stood on the deck of a cargo ship. The sea breeze tousled his graying hair, but his body remained strong, his eyes deep and calm. Dylan Rhodes had lived like a shadow for 6 years, no longer a kingpin or fugitive. Just a nameless man working at the docks of Venice, living quietly without a past, without a future. Each morning he brewed his coffee, read a few pages of a book, and then went to work. And each evening he sat on the deck, watching the horizon, where the sea met the sky, where he believed Victoria still lingered, somewhere among the waves and sunlight. He once thought time would dull the pain, but time, he learned, doesn't erase sorrow. It simply teaches you how to live with it. More gently, more slowly, more gratefully. That afternoon, as he was sorting cargo, someone called softly behind him. Mr. Rhodes Dylan turned. A young Italian worker handed him an envelope postmarked from an unknown address. Across the front, written in black ink, were the words, "To the one who once found the light." He frowned slightly and opened it. Inside was a photograph, a painting of 3 figures standing hand in hand on a beach, the sun blazing behind them. In the corner, a signature Ethan. Beneath the photo, a few uneven lines. "Papa, I don't remember your face clearly, but I can still feel your eyes like the light after the rain, as Mama described it. I don't know where you are, but I believe you're still alive, still watching me grow. I just wanted to say, I forgive you for everything. And I love you." Dylan's hand trembled. He gripped the letter tightly, breath ragged, as if he'd just walked through a storm. And in that moment, all the guilt and shadows that had clung to him for years began to dissolve, leaving only something light and whole. He lifted his gaze toward the sea. The sun was setting fiercely golden alive. In the wind, he could almost smell Victoria's scent, mingling with salt and light again, just as it had been the day she smiled at him under the sun. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Victoria, do you see your light still reaches me even now?" That night, Dylan made a decision. He left Venice quietly, carrying only Ethan's photograph and an old leather notebook. Inside, beside the letters he'd once written to Victoria, were new pages of words written for his son, and for a future he finally believed he deserved. He boarded a plane to America under the cover of darkness. Outside the window, the sky was endless black, pierced by a few stubborn stars. And deep within him, a small flame began to burn again. 3 days later, Maine. The wooden gate creaked open as sea wind swept through, scattering fine white sand. Sergio was repairing a small boat when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and froze. The man standing there wore a dark coat, his frame tall, his eyes a piercing sea green. He didn't speak, only smiled. That same unforgettable smile. "Dylan," Sergio breathed. "My God, you're alive." Dylan placed a hand on his shoulder, voice rough but steady. "I'm just a father, coming home." In that instant, Sergio said nothing more. He embraced him as if the sea had washed away every sin and scar of the past. From the house, Ethan came running, holding a fresh painting in his hands. He stopped short at the sight of the stranger instinct halting him mid-step. Dylan knelt silently, pulling a small silver pendant to Victoria's necklace from his pocket, engraved with the letters E and D. Ethan stared at it eyes wide, then looked up, his lips trembling. "Papa?" Just one word, but it broke something open inside Dylan. He fell to his knees, arms wide. The boy ran into them, clinging tight, as tears spilled between them, mingling with the sound of the surf. No explanations were needed. No proof required. Just an embrace, and the world at last was whole again. Father and son sat together on the sand that evening, watching the sun sink into the waves. The sea shimmered gold, and the sky burned red like a promise fulfilled. Ethan pointed toward the horizon. "Is Mama there, Papa?" Dylan smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, in that place, where it never rains anymore." They sat in silence. The wind carried the scent of salt and memory. Dylan closed his eyes, feeling the small, warm hand in his own. And in that stillness, he understood Victoria had never left. She had only become the light that guided them back to each other. That night, the little house by the sea glowed with warm light. Sergio cooked dinner, Ethan laughed in the kitchen, and Dylan stood on the porch, staring at a sky full of stars. He opened his old notebook and wrote the final line. "The last storm has passed. And you, Victoria, are still the reason I believe light truly exists." He closed the notebook and smiled. The ocean breeze brushed against his face, soft, like the touch of someone watching from afar. Out on the horizon, the lighthouse turned, casting golden beams across the dark water, a gentle reminder that every ending, when held with enough love, becomes a beginning. If this story touched your heart, comment and tell me the moment that moved you the most. Share this story so more people can feel that love, even when broken or unfinished, always leaves a light behind. And don't forget to subscribe to the Romance Stories for more journeys of love loss and hope, where every tear leads to a new sunrise.